bit later, we've got ace-10 offsuit on the button when that same player straddles. His name's Sasha. I raised to 30. The under-the-gun straddler 3-bets to 90. This is a little on the smaller side, and I know this particular opponent is an action player who's capable of re-raising with plenty of worse hands and possibly complete trash just to mix things up. If this guy was willing to make it 100 without looking at his cards, I don't think he'll need much to make it 90 after seeing him. I call for 60 more in position. We're heads up. The flop comes Queen 6-3 rainbow. It's not what we were hoping for. We don't have much except a backdoor straight draw and an over. The opponent checks. He may just be doing this for pot control or as a trap. I check back. No need to get out of line. The turn is the 9 of hearts. It doesn't help us, and there's some small chance that the opponent has pocket 9s that he would have played this way. He checks once more. I'm somewhat perplexed that he hasn't tried to turn his hand into a bluff at this point if he has a king-jack or king-10 suited type of hand. The fact that he hasn't yet makes me concerned that he could have something with value, like jacks or 10s, that he wants to get to showdown with. I check back because I'm okay getting to showdown with ace-high, even if sometimes we lose to ace-king or ace-jack. The river is the queen of hearts, completing the backdoor flush draw and pairing the board. The opponent checks one last time. We don't necessarily need to turn our hand into a bluff. I check back, but still, I'm thinking he likely has to have us beat somehow. I say to myself, okay dude, show us your jiggities. No jiggities for the opponent. He turns over ace-5 of clubs. We turn over our ace-10. It's the winner. It's good to show some of these medium-sized pots, even though it's not all that exciting. Not like when we have pocket kings under the gun +1. I raise to 15. The hijack calls. The button has no respect for my early position raise. He 3-bets to 50. This is a very small sizing, especially considering the hijack called. Part of me is worried that the button has aces. People regularly go with smaller sizings when they have monsters and absolutely don't want their opponents to fold. We've got the second best starting hand though. If we're beat by the best starting hand in poker, that's the definition of a cooler. We can't call and allow a third player behind us an opportunity to see a flop for 35 more. I put in the 4-bet to 160. This disappoints the hijack because he wanted to get in there. Now he's sandwiched between me and the button, who might put in a 5-bet. Ultimately, the hijack folds. I'm okay with it. Let's see how the button wants to proceed. It doesn't look like he's contemplating a fold. We're playing nearly 300 big blinds effective. The button only calls, but just because he didn't 5-bet doesn't mean that I can rule out pocket aces. Most players at 2-5 will 5-bet aces though, so that hand is slightly discounted. I'm more likely up against ace-king or pocket queens or jacks. We're heads up in a big pot. The flop comes 10-7-6 rainbow. It's great for us as long as we're not up against pocket 10s. That hand may not have 3-bet over my early position raise though. I feel pretty good. I'm glad it didn't come out queen-jack high or something like that. I bet 225 to continue building the pot. If we're up against pocket queens or jacks, we want to get as much money in now as possible before an ace or even a king comes. The button calls again. He'd still do this one time with ace-king suited if he has a backdoor flush draw, and certainly with queens or jacks. The turn is the 7 of spades, pairing the board. I love seeing it. No new hands are beating me that I put the opponent on. I'm only thinking about how we're going to be able to make the most money possible. If I bet anything reasonable, hands like ace-king will probably fold, and I'll only get called by queens or jacks. If I check, I may be able to induce a bluff from ace-king if he thinks that I'll have ace-king a lot and he can get me off a chop. Queens and jacks would likely bet for protection against ace-king, and I could potentially go for a check shove that'll look suspicious to target those particular holdings. It seems to me the best way to win the most money and possibly get it all in on the turn is by playing possum. I check with the second strongest hand that I'll ever have. If we see a check back, I'll bet big or even jam on the river in a spot that'll look strange as well. The opponent takes the bait. He bets 350. He only has 600 in his stack on top of that. If he happens to have aces or a set of 10s, we'll be drawing incredibly slim. It's still more likely that the button has a hand that we're beating. We don't want a scare card to come out. It's time to make our move.
All in.
Whenever I jam without the nuts, there's always a second or two that's extremely nerve-wracking when I hope to fade the snap call. There's no snap call this time. As the opponent takes longer and longer, it's more clear to me that we have him in terrible shape. Ace-king should have folded by now, but maybe my line looks strange enough to get called by that hand, in addition to queens and jacks, since the price is somewhat decent. After a full minute, the opponent doesn't seem sure, but comes to a decision.
Call. Call. All in call.
We've got one more card to go for a pot that's over 500 big blinds. We just want to see a nice low card. The river is the ace of hearts. At first it's scary because our hand is downgraded, but the opponent doesn't seem thrilled, so we can breathe again.
Nice.
It's an enormous all-in pot that goes our way. Although the button never showed what he had, he'd later confirmed that he had pocket queens, which is the main hand that we were targeting. The play works out just how we drew it up to get maximum value before the ace on the river came out, which could have caused us to make a lot less money or potentially even lose the hand if we didn't put in the check raise on the turn. I get switched to a new table, and the very first hand I'm dealt is ace-king offsuit in the big blind before I've even gotten my chips completely out of the rack. There's a straddle on, a player in middle position raises to 30. The cutoff has a playable hand. He calls, he's gonna regret it. The small blind is a feisty dude. He 3-bets to 100. There's another small sizing given the circumstances and the fact that he's out of position on the preflop raiser and caller. I may have the best hand, or at least 2 overs. Flat calling and playing potentially a 4-way pot out of position isn't too appealing. I cold 4-bet to 300. It should look particularly odd being my first hand at this new location. It might appear that I'm only 4-betting immediately to set the tone and to bully people. The initial preflop raiser folds, the cutoff folds, the action is on the small blind. He started the hand with 900 total, and he 5-bet rips it. He might have aces or kings, but the amount of those possible combos gets cut in half, knowing that there are only 3 of those cards each that are unaccounted for. I snap call, and the opponent isn't too happy to see it. This makes me feel a lot better because we could be against queens or jacks. Maybe the opponent has the same hand.
First hand.
Yeah, it's not that good. We're probably chopping. If you're not excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We're up against another ace-king offsuit. I used to almost auto-assume that we'd be chopping in a scenario like this, but over the past year, I've seen several flushes get made with a lot on the line. Most recently, I won a massive one on day 3 of the 5K WPT Gardens main event during the final table bubble. Perhaps I'm due to lose an ace-king versus ace-king. The flop comes queen 9-4 rainbow. There's no drama. This one will be a chop. We at least split the other player's money that was put in pre-flop. At a new table, we're dealt 7-5 of hearts in the big blind. Under the gun +1 raises to 20. The hijack calls. We're getting a $5 discount and we're closing the action. I call for 15 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop from out of position. The dealer puts out ace, queen, deuce, all hearts. We flop a flush in a multi-way pot. What's better is that the ace and queen of hearts are already out there, minimizing the amount of possible flush combos that we'd be up against that are beating us. I check to the pre-flop raiser. He doesn't want to fire. He checks. This is telling because he probably would have bet with 2-pair or a set. If he had a set of aces, for instance, this wouldn't be the type of board that he'd be slow playing. The hijack also checks. I can rule out him having 2-pair or a set as well. The turn is the queen of spades. I don't have to be all that worried about the board pairing. I can't let anyone see a free river card though. I bet 50 for value. Under the gun +1 is now going to all of a sudden represent a monster. He min raises to 100. The hijack realizes that he's no good. He folds. Under the gun +1 only has about 330 total. Since I ruled out under the gun +1 having a set or 2-pair on the flop, there's no way he'll have a full house on the turn. Perhaps he has king jack or king 10 of hearts and I'm drawing dead, but there are more trip queen combos that he might play this way that I'm ahead of. I'm not folding. I jam for 330 effective. Under the gun +1 doesn't believe that I've got him beat. He calls. I'm not particularly excited to see the call because even if I'm not crushed, the opponent will definitely have outs. I turn over our flush. The river is the 9 of spades. It's seemingly safe. The opponent doesn't have the winner. He throws his king-queen face up into the middle. We get a great run out to stack another opponent. With this win, we're up over 1,700 on the session.